Christmas. Enjoying Christmas this year, like so many other things in this shitty year, may seem impossible. Smart people aren't going to see their families, there's hardly any mall Santas around, and there's definitely not any events that require a large number of people to go to. You know, except of course you're one of those stupid people that thinks it's all some sort of hoax, and that even if it isn't, you shouldn't let fear dictate your lives. And so what if 260,000 Americans have died? I want to go to my nephew's house to argue if racism is good, actually. As I was writing this, Thanksgiving was like a week away, and it was amazing how many people cannot seem to see beyond their own selfish desires and realize that the longer we treat COVID like it's not a big deal or important at all, the longer we'll have to deal with it in the long run. But just because the holidays are going to be different this year does not mean that they can't be enjoyable. I mean, in my case, it won't look much different. I'll also be listening to Christmas music, decorating my tree, making cookies, and of course, watching my favorite Christmas specials and movies. And so, I decided, since I have still quite a bit of All-Stars to go, and hey, it's December, why don't we count my top 10 favorite Christmas specials / movies. Number 10. Peanuts do like a really beloved holiday special? Like, wasn't it like really famous and like a million people watched it or something? I don't know. I'm a Gen Zer. I don't know anything about how ratings work. I prefer to watch 10 episodes of a Netflix show with about 3 episodes worth of content and then waiting 15 months for the next season. Oh joy, do I love modern television. In all seriousness, this gets a spot on the list mostly out of posterity more so than anything else. There was a little bit of hysteria going on earlier this year when we thought this 56-year-old special would not be on television this year. A topic I actually made a whole video about until the news dropped that day that in fact Charlie Brown Thanksgiving and Charlie Brown Christmas would be airing on PBS this year. As for the special itself, well, it's very Christmassy. I can't deny that. It's absolutely dripping with Christmas atmosphere. And it's one of the few specials to actually have the music it introduced become officially part of the Christmas canon. Beautifully animated with gorgeous backgrounds, bright colors, and... okay, well the actual character animation is shoddy, but hey, give them a break. It was like, they had 6 months to prepare for this. Be amazed it looks as good as it does. Even with the production team also notably thought the special was going to be a disaster, and in fact CBS only ran it because they'd already paid for it, and then it ended up being the most watched thing that night. By, like, a lot. Even with the monstrous success this special had, the creator of the comic strip himself, Charles Schulz, doesn't like it. He said, and I quote, "The continued success of the special amazes me. The drawings are terrible." I agree with that sentiment, but after another look, I don't think nostalgia is the only reason this special has thrived. Even that criticism of there being a lot of filler doesn't hold up, actually. Sure, there are tons of animation errors, the pacing is all off, and the story itself doesn't really get started until halfway through. And yet, there's something about it that's steeped in Christmas magic. I adore the tone of the special, how it's both dire and somehow cheerful at the same time. It's dreary, it's moody, it's unlike the saccharine sweetness that usually accompanies Christmas specials like this. Even that criticism of there being a lot of filler doesn't hold up, actually, because all of that preamble of Charlie Brown wandering around his town, witnessing the commercialization of Christmas unfold right in front of his very eyes, that's the story. That is the point of the story. For kids, I think it's one of the first specials to confide in them that this season isn't as happy-go-lucky and stress-free as everyone pretends it is. Even that song at the beginning, through sheer talent, Vince takes lyrics that would sound happy and downright cliched and somehow turns them into something resembling sarcasm almost. Point being, I can definitely see why this is so beloved and still an irreplaceable part of the holiday season, and it definitely more than deserves a spot on this list. Number 9. I Want a Dog for Christmas, Charlie Brown. I promise I will stop talking about Peanuts soon, but what can I say? In many ways, they embody the holiday more than anyone else. I put this higher than a Charlie Brown Christmas for a couple of reasons. 1, because it's longer. 2, because it has a stronger story. And 3, because it has sharper, wittier, smarter, and funnier dialogue in my mind. I'm definitely showing my age as someone who was barely existing in the world while Peanuts was in the newspaper, as the era that everyone seems to think that Schulz was phoning it in is the era that I like the most. And so, of course, as a special that is mostly adapting material from that era, I would love it, right? Rerun
For the
might
first
just be one of
time
my
ever,
favorite
unwrap the
characters
fun
in all
on a
of Peanuts.
remastered
Right
deluxe
next to
edition
Pepper
DVD.
Patty.
Big
And honestly,
sisters
I
are
don't
the
think I can express my
crabgrass
love
in
for
the
something
lawn of
better than
life.
him. He's such
Includes a new
misunderstood
documentary
member
about the
society
creation of
that is
Run Run
fully
Van
aware
Pelt.
that
Lucy
society
and
won't
Rhino.
respect his opinion for years to come. And even as a kid with pretty amazing parents who always treated me respectfully, there was still a huge part of me that always resonated with that as a kid. And I think it was this special that really inspired my love of biting slapstick comedy. There's slapstick, sure, but the stuff that always made me laugh out loud as a kid were the parts where Rerun was riding on the back of his mother's bicycle and making comments and observations about the world and the wise beyond their years way that only Peanuts or Calvin and Hobbes could do. This is the very definition of comfort food for me. I love revisiting this year after year and feeling all warm and fuzzy. I know a lot of people prefer Charlie Brown Christmas, but to me, this is always the gold standard for what Peanuts could be. Number 8, A Muppet Family Christmas. Gosh, these are all so good. This is only number 8? So if Charlie Brown had mostly filler, then this is pretty much all filler. There really isn't a story here at all. This is an obscure piece of Muppets media. To this day, I think it's had only one release on home video, and most of the time, people just find it via YouTube, where it's up, uninterrupted, for anyone to watch. Copyright be damned. This aired once, all the way back in 1987, and I love every second of it. Like I said, there's barely anything you could qualify as a story. The closest thing to one would be Fozzie Bear invites himself and the rest of the Muppets to his mom's cottage for Christmas. Unbeknownst to him, she already has plans to go on vacation and rent out her cottage for the night. Their plans are ruined, chaos ensues, and we're essentially just a fly on the wall to what a Muppet family Christmas looks like. I say there isn't a story, but that's not necessarily true. It's really more like a bunch of little plot threads that come and go throughout the show. But really, it's just an excuse to spend 48 minutes with the Muppets during Christmas. And honestly, who wouldn't love that? This is one of the last Muppet things ever produced by Jim Henson, and it has that wonderful, magic, specific Muppetiness that only Jim Henson could really ever tap into. Like I said, it's really obscure, and it only has one release on home video, and that's mostly because of a bunch of copyright red tape. Not only just with all the Christmas songs that are in it, there's a lot of singing in this, but also because, I didn't mention this, but it is a crossover between Fraggle Rock, Sesame Street, and the Muppets, and all of those things are owned by different people now, which means that, like, it will probably never get a home video release unless Disney becomes even more of a monopoly and purchases those other two, and then they'll put it on Disney Plus and make a sequel of it and all that good stuff. Luckily, this means for now that we can just pirate it on YouTube whenever we want. We don't have to worry. I think the reason it's left uninterrupted on YouTube is because of that whole copyright thing. Now, this is based purely on nothing, so don't take my word for it, but it might be that Disney can't claim a copyright on A Muppet Family Christmas, because then that would be them infringing on Sesame Street's copyright, because that would be them claiming ownership of the Sesame Street characters and vice versa, so it's all just one big mess, and so I guess they figure it's best just, well, left enough alone to be this little, obscure, classic piece of Muppet television. I mean, like I said, I found it on YouTube just a short 5 years ago, and it's become part of my holiday mainstay ever since. If you love the Muppets, or hell, even if you don't, you should definitely check it out. It's fun, it's sweet, it's adorable, it's all of these things, and I just love it oh so dearly much. Number 7. Winnie the Pooh and Christmas 2. At this point, it's clear that with the exception of A Muppet Family Christmas, most of the stuff on this list is stuff I watched as a kid. Well, that makes sense. Christmas is already a holiday steeped with nostalgia, but even then, I don't think there's any way I can justify this. After forgetting to request a present in a letter for Santa, the gang attempts to retrieve the letter so Pooh can ask for a present. They send the letter again, but the wind is going the wrong way and it finds itself in Pooh's house, so it's up to him to take up the mantle of Santa Claus and save Christmas. There's really not all that much to it, but again, I just adore this special so much. I love the saccharine sweetness, I love the quippy dialogue, I love the hijinks that ensue. I loved this special ever since I popped it in the VHS for the first time since I was 0. I'm assuming. I don't really remember when I watched this for the first time. Fun fact, this special is so forgotten that literally the only way you can watch it is on that VHS home release. It hasn't even been converted into DVD. Unless, of course, you count that time where it was included in the direct-to-DVD movie, and I use the term extremely loosely, Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year. But you shouldn't, because it's awful, it's hardly a movie, and the show in that movie is absolutely horrible. Rabbits fur is the wrong color, and most importantly, Christopher Robin sounds like one of those fan anime overdubs. Like, the dubbing is so awful. I'm wondering if they never put it on DVD specifically so you had to buy that version, and so the new generation would never notice that anything is weird. Like, if you just brush the original under the rug and act like it was always part of this movie, then the new generation will never have any reason to suspect that it was anything different. Yes, children, Christopher Robin always sounded like he was asleep when he recorded all of his dialogue. There was never any war. It was all just a dream. Yeah, I kinda got sidetracked by Disney's laziness with how they handled this special, but like I said, this is a childhood favorite, not an intellectual love. I can't defend it. Move on. Next. This list is so basic. This is another very subjective, nostalgia-based pick. As I've gotten older, I've started to notice the very real flaws that permeate throughout this movie. Most notably, the way everyone doesn't move like a person, and they're all stuck in this uncanny valley weirdness. It's not obvious all the time, except for when, you know, the bodies need to be expressive and they start moving, and oh god, it looks so unnatural. I've also become less fond of the moral this movie spouts out, that being the traditional, not blindly believing in something that you can't prove doesn't mean that you're an inquisitive, curious person who understands how the world works and doesn't believe things without evidence. It means you don't have an open mind. You should just believe! This becomes all the more egregious when it seems like the universe is punishing the main character for not believing in Santa and won't even let him see Santa until he does, as if him believing in Santa just because he sees him would be defeating the point. But no, that is how you believe in things. You see them. That's how your opinions should be formed. I don't know. With the world the way it is, you know, with the leader of the free world for the next month or so, being able to like just say any random shit that comes across his mind, regardless of whether or not it's true or whether it's based in any reality or not, and then his supporters turning around and going, well, just believing him because, well, he said it, so it must be true. I think that maybe, with all that's going on in the world right now, that, even still, again, this movie is just too nostalgic for me to not love it. It could sound all silly or sappy, but watching this movie brings me joy. Like, I'm literally a happy person when I watch this movie. I freaking love everything about this from the kid, and always secretly wish that a train showed up in front of my house. I love the high-tech version of the North Pole, explaining things that I always questioned as a child, and in fact became my de facto version of what the North Pole must look like. Structurally, this movie is sort of a mess, as it's less of a plot and more of a collection of things happening, which, yeah, I guess could be considered the definition of a plot. But I mean that there's no real, like, character or thematic connection between all the set pieces. It just goes from point A to point B. But god damn it, the set pieces aren't fucking amazing. The journey through the workshop, the steep train tracks, the ice lake part. I like love trains the same way someone like, say, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory does. But, like, I don't just randomly think about trains. When I'm watching Harry Potter or I'm watching this movie, I become a train fanatic. I freaking love this locomotive. Like, its aesthetic is just so damn beautiful. A few years ago, when I was still by the thinnest of margins a child, I went to this event that was supposed to be like a real-life Polar Express. And it was weird because me and my sister were like the only teenagers there. But still, it was amazing. The hosts were nice. We even talked about the movie with the hosts being, you know, the only people on the train that were alive when the movie came out. Basically, my point is that it was a fun and awesome and unforgettable experience before, you know, the cold, bitter reality of adulthood took over, and I forgot where I was going with this. But basically, I love this movie. I could watch this movie like 4 or 5 times and never get sick of it. Before Arthur Christmas, this was the closest attempt we had to meshing the cold, hard logic of the real world with the magic and whimsy of Santa Claus. If your kids haven't watched this yet, please do them a favor and let them experience this, and don't turn it off when they complain that the people look like fleshy robots. That's just the price to pay for whimsy.